So there's been some very interesting and crazy news that just came out about the UFC gym chain. Basically, here I'll just read it to you. The UFC gym chain collapses, owing more than $5 million amidst major legal battle with franchisees over profitability. Now I'm going to read a little bit of this article and then I'm going to kind of give my thoughts on this. The decision came after the group lost a court battle with 3 of its franchisees over misrepresentations over the profitability of the businesses, which Wexted administrator Rajiv Goyal wrote was the reason it went under in a report to regulator ASIC. Last month, the federal court ordered agreements with the 3 franchisees should be voided, and that $5.2 million should be paid by the group to the successful litigants. $5.2 million is not a chump change lump sum of money. That is quite a bit of money. Let's see, where did this happen? Okay, so each franchisee had paid up to $1.4 million to startup costs and other expenses, but had made operating losses of between $391,000 and $962,000. Judge Thawley said that while the UFG's agreement that the UFC gyms had a proven business model that worked in Australia was a representation of existing fact, it could be considered misleading due to the reality of some gyms were not performing well. Now, I am fairly familiar with the UFC Gym's business models. I worked for a UFC gym for quite some time, and there were moments where, you know, I was looking to open up a gym of my own, and opening up the UFC gym was definitely something that I've thought about in the past. And I can tell you this, I can tell you guys this, that I can guarantee you that when I was doing my research, $1.4 million was not a part of anything that regarded startup costs. I think when you look at $1.4 million as a startup for a gym, that's just outrageous. I don't think many people would invest in a gym startup plan that consisted of you investing $1.4 million off the rip. Now, I might be incorrect on this, but I just don't think that many people would. And I do think over the course of the last, I don't know, 10 years, the UFC gym has been making a lot of pop-ups. And I can only speak for, you know, the United States, and there were a decent amount that were popping up. Now, here's something that I should take note to you guys. The UFC gym that I once worked for, that I once worked under, went under. It's no longer around. And I truly believe it was because of expenses. I truly believe that it was a lot of the reason of why that it closed was because that the gym could not keep up with the expenses equal to, or comparatively speaking, to the amount of money that they were bringing in. And so I will continue reading. With the franchise holders now in administration, it is unclear how much, if any, of the $5.2 million will be received by franchisees. Mr. Goyle admitted the group may have been insolvent from as early as March, but that further investigations were needed to create a complete picture of the business finances. He added it was possible that the UFG had incurred significant debts whilst insolvent, and that he was in the process of selling off any remaining assets. So, to give a little bit of my thoughts, I guess my ending thoughts on this topic, I think gyms in general are hard to keep up with as far as business models. In my research of doing a lot of startups and businesses, it has occurred to me that some of the hardest businesses, I would say top 2 businesses as far as startups, as far as common startups, are restaurants and gyms. Now, my opinion when it comes to gyms, I can't speak on restaurants, but I can speak heavily on gyms. That, well, first, if you're given a business model that does not, that is not clear with the amount of expenses that you will be spending, I think that you're already at a downslope. You're already at a disadvantage, and it's also a hard upkeep. I think it's a very demanding thing to try to start up, and that's why you see a lot of gyms going under today. I mean, how many gyms have you been to that you've known of, even in your local spot, that have gone under? And so if you're presented with, like I said, a model that doesn't clearly explain the amount of expenses that you're putting in, I think that you're already at a huge disadvantage. And so there's a reason why gyms go under. And I think the UFC gym model is good. I really do. But I don't think there are many gyms out there that are worth starting up. And you have to invest over $1.4 million. I don't think that would be reasonable for a lot of people who are looking to be business owners in the fitness world. And that is something that I took into consideration. That is something that has made me hesitant in wanting to open up a gym, is because I understand the overhead. A lot of the times these gyms are put into places that the rent itself can make it hard to keep up with the demand. People can be inconsistent when it comes to gyms. It's one of those things where it's like, once the well is dry of the people in that gym's local area, then the well is just dry. You have enough people who have tried it and who have stopped. You have enough people who have taken the free membership, for that week, 2 weeks, a month, and then they stop, and then they end up going to Planet Fitness that is much cheaper. And let's be honest, there's a lot of culture, especially in America, that I wouldn't say takes fitness serious enough to be consistent. Now, there are those who do, but a lot of the times, is it enough people to keep your lights on? And I would say that that's a tough task, and it's a tough business model to keep going consistently. And like I said previously, it's also a very demanding position. A lot of the times, owners, especially when it comes to startup, we all know that gyms can have very demanding hours. And so a lot of the owners go in basically working all day from super early morning. Because if you're a gym, a lot of gyms open up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m., and you're there from 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 p.m., and that can be extremely demanding. And then you look at the expenses that occur, and you look at the lack of consistency that will probably come at some point in time. It's a hard task. And even when you look at certain restaurants and things like that, you can be a very, very good restaurant, and I would imagine you can hold up expenses because your food's good, the atmosphere is good, people are going to want to come back over and over and over again. You can even become, a tourist attraction at some point. So that, when tourists come through in the summer or during certain times of the year, that's a time to hit it too. But if you're in an area that is strictly reliant off of locals, that's a tough and tall order. And so I think that that's besides the fact of what's going on in this case. I think this case, if you spent $1.4 million on a startup, that was most certainly not in the business model. And I can see why the UFC gym lost this case. I can see why that a lot of them closed. I can see why my gym closed that I worked at. If you guys go to my social media, you will see that I was at a UFC gym, and that current UFC gym that you are looking at on my page, it's no longer around. And I think that expenses was a huge factor. So comment down below what you guys think about this situation, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.